Well, Peter, you're an Australian partner based in New York. Really nice to see you. I assume that you're still on lockdown as we are here in Chicago.
Hi, Rod. Great to see you. Good morning. And yes, we are. I'm sitting here in my apartment on Upper West Side. It's a beautiful day today, so that's lovely.
Nice.
But we've been here for a long while now and still working our way through.
Well, it's the way of the world at the moment. So tell me a little bit about your experience. Like I said, Australian, you're assigned to New York. What's that experience meant for you?
Yeah, so I came over about 18 months ago, and it's actually the second long-term assignment I've had with KPMG. I've clocked up a little over 20 years now with the firm. And when I was a manager, I went to London for 2 years. So that was back it was actually 2004 to 2006. So that was the lead up before the global financial crisis, which was a really interesting time. But this time in New York, coming over as a partner and coming over really to look after what we call the Australia-US corridor, it's been really interesting. Professionally, there is so much going on along that corridor, it's great in terms of getting involved in a whole range of different clients. And then personally, it's been both fantastic and very challenging this year for obvious reasons, as we've all found as we're dealing with the pandemic. But when you come over as a partner, you really need to think hard about, how do I build my network? How do I make new relationships over here with clients? And what should I be doing that's most effective? There's no instruction booklet. Nobody says this is what you do and this is how you do it. So it's challenging, but I found it great because you really fall back on your commercial instincts, personal communication, building relationships to get that net so you can then build from there. So it's been a really interesting year, but I personally feel I'm very glad to be here and still be here doing it.
And how does it change, if at all? How does it change your perspectives, moving around the world like that versus just choosing to stay in your own country?
It really gives you a sense of the scale, the breadth, and how much there is in KPMG. I'm very fortunate to come from Australia, which is a fantastic firm. It's got a great group of partners and staff, and I found that really beneficial throughout my career, both developing professionally and making a lot of friends. But then when you come overseas, you're always a little nervous at first. You don't quite know what it will be like. You know a few people, but you really don't know a lot of others. And so to some extent, you've got to go and put yourself in front of people that you don't know and don't know you. So you've got to develop your elevator pitch, why they should talk to you. But I've almost invariably found that people have been great in making time to understand who I am and how we can work together. And, that makes me really proud of KPMG. You hear a lot about our culture. And I think when you come overseas and you live that and you start to see the scale of the firm globally and how it works, you really see it in action.
That's really nice. And yes, it's easy to forget just how big an organization the firm is. So just turning to what you see Australian investors focusing on today when they think about the US market, what are you seeing going on?
Okay, quite a lot, to be honest. It's actually been a fairly busy year despite the disruption. And what we're actually seeing is the slowdown that occurred in the first part of 2020 has really just resulted in deferred activity that's picked up to the extent now that the partners I work with over here in the US are actually probably as busy as, or maybe a little bit busier than they were a year ago. And a big driver of that is Australian superannuation or pension funds and asset managers that are increasingly looking at the US, the Australian market, and in particular, the infrastructure sector. So the Australian market has quite a developed infrastructure sector and active government privatisation, but it's very competitive. And so Australian investors are increasingly looking at allocating capital into the US. The US has immense infrastructure investment needs. And we're seeing quite a lot of dry powder that's being deployed now. And this is a long and ongoing trend that we're expecting to see continue. And in particular, what we're starting to see is, just with a couple of them, looking at putting people on the ground over here and actually setting up their own US offices. And that is following a path that some of the really big Canadian funds did a number of years ago. It's great to see that with the Australians, as their focus on the US market is just increasing more and more. Their allocation of capital and participation in consortium and co-investment is growing at an increasing rate. So we see that really as a long-term trend, and see that continuing throughout the recovery and on into the future, which really enjoying being part of. It's a real wave that's it's great to be part of and help them as they grow their presence here in the US.
Well, that's really interesting, and it's certainly true. There's a huge infrastructure demand pent up here in the United States. So that's fascinating, Peter. Look, thank you very much for your time. It's great to catch up with you again, and I look forward to seeing you in person when we can travel again.
Thanks, Rod. I'm very much looking forward to see you and a lot of other people in person. So have a great day.
Okay.